thank you guys again all for being here. I'm in rainy London still, and I'm so happy to talk to all of you again. Today's theme is close to my heart and many of ours, travel as a force for good. I even wore our t-shirt today because we had these made before COVID-19. It's always been the mission, and I'm so excited to have Julia Cosgrove, our VP and Editor-in-Chief here, and she'll talk more about that from Afar's point of view. But first I wanted to talk about the frame of our conversation before I introduce the rest of our amazing panel. You know, for the past 2 years in particular, we've talked about and heard a lot about over-tourism, sustainability in the industry, flight shaming, all of this rightfully so. But we didn't really talk about as much travel as a force for good. And we had Preferred Hotels CEO on a few weeks ago, and they frame it as believe in travel, which I love. The United Nations has 3 pillars of sustainability: environmental, like reduce, reuse, recycle; social, which is like protecting cultural heritage, like restoring historic buildings and anti-poaching efforts in Africa; and then economic benefits to local communities, which of course we all know is hit very hard right now. Each of these is so important, and there's also our personal, mental, and emotional benefits that happen when we travel, which I know all of us are sorely missing right now. So, you know, the group that we have gathered here today, whether we own a small business or work for a large company, we all have the power to incite change. We're going to be talking about that today and what that looks like. Yesterday, I got on the phone with a friend in Florence, and I learned how a group of top leaders in Florence, including the mayor, are getting together to figure out ways to combat over-tourism because they finally have time now, right? They didn't have time before. So, you know, these delicate conversations to be had now. How do we encourage travel when we can while hoping for a cleaner, better world as a whole? And how do we also make it good for business? Because that matters too. And we're really optimistic at Afar. We actually did a reader survey last week, and the results were really good about people wanting to travel now. And Ellen will talk more about that at the end. So for our panel, if you can just wave hi when I introduce you, that would be great. We have Ben Trod, the SVP of Sales and Hotel Marketing for Four Seasons Hotels and Resorts. We have. Good afternoon.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you, Ben. We have Vanessa Boz, a private travel designer who's based in London with Boz Around Private Travel.
Hi, thank you for having me, yes.
We have Will Cabers, I think I'm saying that right, VP of Coronet Travel based in St. Louis.
St. Louis, thanks for having me.
Yeah. We have Terry Dale, the president of USTUA, the United States Tour Operators Association.
Good to be here.
We have Catherine Carno. Catherine, she's a National Geographic photographer and runs Catherine Carno Photo Workshops.
Thank you so much.
And then we have Ellen Asmodeo, our Executive VP and Chief Revenue Officer for Afar. And Julia Cosgrove, of course, our VP and Editor-in-Chief. So Julia, I'd love to open with you and just kind of talk about Afar's mission and what it means to you personally and professionally.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Annie, and it's a privilege to be here with all of you today. Wish we could be closer, but soon enough. And a special thanks to Annie and Ellen and the Afar team for launching these conversations. I think it's such an important time to connect with people in our business from all over the world. So welcome all of you from all over the world. At Afar, you know, we truly believe in the power of travel as a force for good. And that's been fueled by our strong and unwavering mission to inspire, guide, and enable people to have deeper, richer, and more fulfilling experiences. It's been our mission since day one. We believe that every traveler is a steward of the world, and that being a good traveler means being a good guest. Since Afar launched in 2009, we have been committed to celebrating our core brand values of curiosity, open-mindedness, and cultural diversity. And today, as travel has come to a standstill and our audience of the world's best travelers is stuck at home, I think it's more imperative than ever that we continue to speak to and engage with the global citizens who share our mindset and believe in the power of travel to transform communities and individual lives for the better. Because when we can travel again, they'll be the first out the front door, the first into the car, the first into the plane, and the first into the hotel. You know, before, as Annie alluded to, before this pandemic, the biggest threat to travel was over-tourism. Too many people going to the same place at the same time to take the same picture, to share with the same group of people. think we can all vaguely remember bragging rights and FOMO, even though it may feel like a lifetime ago. I have a suggestion that maybe we don't go back to that reality. At Afar, we believe that the beauty of travel is that it isn't a monoculture, and we want to keep it that way. So as we begin to slowly tiptoe and emerge from our homes, I think it's going to be more critical than ever that we go to places that aren't overrun with people, that we visit in shoulder seasons or off-peak times of year, and that we really commit to seeking out untrammeled destinations and lesser-known sites. We also believe that by focusing on the right kind of travel, for us that's purpose-driven, conscientious, and responsible, we can help educate and inform our readers about what we can all do to travel smarter and lessen our footprint along the way. Before the pandemic, there's been a great deal of talk around sustainability and travel. We don't see those two things as mutually exclusive. When sustainability is done right, it's good for the traveler, it's good for the travel business. And, again, we think of it in the same three categories that I'm sure many of you do: environmental, cultural, and economic. And we know that travel makes individuals more aware of their place in the world and makes the world more connected. Travel fosters empathy. We put out an empathy issue earlier this spring, which in turn leads to real economic change. And we know that by supporting local economies built on travel and tourism, and by valuing experiences over things, travelers can make a huge impact on local communities and the global economy. And this approach influences what Afar covers and how we cover it. And I think sustainability will be an even more critical part of the conversation as the world starts to open up again. The climate crisis is upon us, and even the sort of anecdotal positive environmental indications to come out of this period of lockdown. We've reported on some of them: the clear Himalayan skies, South Africa's napping lions, those wandering goats and whales that made the rounds on social. They won't be forgotten, but I think other stories are emerging too of humans considering their impact and using this crisis as an opportunity to really make change. In Milan, where congestion and pollution have plummeted, city officials are converting 22 miles of streets into dedicated bicycling spaces. And Paris just announced a 400-mile network of temporary cycle routes. Perhaps that'll become more permanent, who knows? The pandemic has revealed a world without travel, which is scary for all of us in travel. But I think we're learning a little bit, certainly every day, about what we'd taken for granted, what we miss the most, what we long to see again. We really feel connected to each other, all of us throughout the world, in a way that maybe we never have before. And so as the world looks toward recovery, our team will be exploring what travel means now, but also looking ahead with hope to where travel is heading. One thing that is here to stay, Afar readers, and I'm sure many of your clients and others, want travel that reflects their values. Consumers are increasingly looking for companies to act with purpose and to be leaders in issues that matter to them. And the right kind of travel means many things, but for us, it's based on some core ideas: transformative travel, traveling more deeply to experience a place like a local, pursuing destinations that aren't overcrowded. I know that means a little bit different than it meant before, and going off the beaten path in on the beaten path places. And this is our approach to travel, and we've been delivering it to audiences for more than a decade. Our brand voice isn't preachy or earnest, because we also know that at its core, travel is about delight and wonder and fun. Travel is also about making individuals more aware of their place in the world and making the world more connected. Bruce Poontip, the CEO of G Adventures, whom we honored 2 years ago as part of our Travel Vanguard, put it so well at our awards show in New York. He said, "If done right, travel can be the world's most successful form of wealth redistribution." The lens that we see the world in is travel as a force for good. And for us, that means more inclusive, more sustainable, and more about leaving the world in a better place than we found it. And I think governments, companies, and individuals all of us can help plan for a post-coronavirus future in a more conscious way. And as travelers, we can do our part with every spending decision we make. I really believe that we have what I hope is a once-in-a-century opportunity to build a better travel industry and a better world, one that values people and the future of our planet, one that's smarter and more human-centric. Shannon Stoll, the head of the ATTA and another Afar Vanguard honoree last year, was quoted last week or this week in a piece by Forbes. And he said, quote, "I really hope that companies and professionals will not try to go back to what we considered normal, because normal was not very responsible as an overall industry. The opportunity now is for leaders to lead and do the right thing by rebuilding smarter, which may mean smaller, and demand that travelers also behave as though travel is a privilege and not a right." So I know that was a lot. I'm going to close and send the mic off to someone else here, but I really do want to implore all of you on the call today, like, let's think about ways to embrace a growth mindset in the midst of the world being turned upside down. Let's not squander this opportunity to rethink how we view travel. Let's be more deliberate citizens of the world. And as members of this important industry that fuels so much good, let's all be the better travelers who lead the way.
Thank you, Julia. I'm just going to listen to that over and over again whenever I'm feeling down about the world. So thank you.
I tried, man. We all need a little up right now, so trying to focus on it.
So what I'd like to do, and kind of just to follow that, before we get into specifics, and I have so many things I want to ask everyone, is if I could just ask each panelist for 30 seconds, a minute, just to kind of tell us what personally your view of travel as a force for good is. Terry, if I could start with you, because you're at the top on my screen.
Sure. Well, first I want to say a huge thank you to Afar, because we've had a 7-year partnership with you. And I think the reason it works is because we have so many shared values. And so thank you for being just an amazing partner. So I feel urgency, and I've always felt urgency, but in this particular environment, the urgency to create and deliver good is so extraordinary. So for me, the force for good and what we're talking about today is really the future, and I couldn't be more proud to be with you.
Thank you, Terry. Thank you. Catherine, if I could ask you.
Well, as a photographer and also as a leader of my workshops, you know, my photography and my workshops, it's all about people that we meet on our travels, whether it's domestically or in foreign countries. And it's about spending real time with real people, giving each person that we meet respect. You know, when we travel, we are ambassadors. And I think that as Americans, more than ever, we need to acknowledge how important this is, what kind of ambassadors we are. So my photography and in my workshops, it's people-to-people diplomacy. I'm not trying to save the world. I just want us to reach people individually, one by one, and give them the time that it takes to be respectful. It's about creating friendships through photography. It's about sharing the experience of photography and how we share that experience. It's about giving back. It's about sharing the experience when we're taking pictures, and it's about returning back with photographs. And this is what creates long-term friendships. So I think this is what really it's about. It's about creating friendships around the world.
I love that. And I've definitely seen that in action with you. Ben.
Thank you. I think there's so many sort of subliminal messages that we get through travel. Think about the ability to sate people's curiosity and the stimuli that brings to other parts of people's lives, and we love to see that translated into, you know, the rest of people's work or home lives or families. And you see families coming together through travel. I think those parts of it are fantastic. But when I look at it from a hotel operator perspective, I also see so many fantastic careers that have been created, so many people who built wonderful lives for themselves and for their families. You know, as you know, I was very fortunate to run the Beverly Wilshire for 7 years until the last few years, and would meet at 45-year employees who came to the country and have built a career that's enabled them to send their children through college and just build a really, really strong life for themselves and a community around them, using the hospitality business and the travel business as a base for that. So we have a huge sense of responsibility, and that obviously drives our purpose to continue to provide careers and lives for people and their families.
I love that. I love the word curiosity. That's like what I want to give my daughter. Will, if I could ask you, what does travel as a force for good mean to you?
First, I mean, I agree with everything Julia said, and I think that your ideals speak to everything that I've been doing and we've been talking about for the past 8 years. Myself and a lot of my clients have enjoyed over the years going to places after a crisis to take part in rebuilding and also to see it in a state of purity and authenticity that usually isn't there. And right now, the entire world is a crisis. So I see where there's so much opportunity to send people around the world and give them an opportunity like they'll never have for the next couple of years.
Absolutely. Vanessa.
Yes, I mean, I'm sitting here in Europe, and I think also the way I look at travel as a force for good is from the perspective of the world that we are in today, where borders are closing and mentalities are tightening, and I've really felt very strong these last few years, especially about this idea that travel is a force for good, because it allows us. We were using the words stay curious, stay open-minded and tolerant. I mean, I'm particularly passionate about family travel, and I know we'll talk about that, but I think this idea of really using the opportunity to travel as a force for good, to just stay connected with the world and keep tolerance alive. And there's a quote of an American writer that I always like to refer to in why I think traveling does so much good to the world is so much of who we are is where we have been. And it's a writer called William Lankerish. And I think that all those tiny moments that we build in ourselves in any journey that we take, shape who we are, shape our children. And really, while force for good can mean different things to different people, ultimately, I think it's about inner exploration and also connecting with the outside world. And in that respect, it's a very powerful tool. And also, I think it's quite unique in the sense that it's double-sided. Travel is a space where both the spender and the receiver are in a position to do good and receive good. I mean, the spender goes, of course, on a journey, on a trip to explore, to relax. But if it's done in a meaningful way and in a conscientious way, the receiver, the communities that surround the destination really can benefit tremendously. So it's really beautiful that it's double-sided that way.
I love that. Yeah. I'm already like tearing up several times just to let you guys know. Thank you, Vanessa, for that. I'm going to switch up the order a little bit, but I'm going to go back to Terry. And I just kind of want to ask you, I mean, your US2A represents so many members, so many amazing members who lead groups of people around the world. What are some specific things that you've seen that companies have done to make tours more sustainable, whether it's low season or whatever else it is?
Yeah, first, I'd like to talk about Tourism Cares, which I know you're familiar with. And our leaders over a decade ago had the foresight and vision to build Tourism Cares. And it has evolved over the past decade or so into an organization that focuses on social responsibility and sustainability. And they help inspire us and our members as we figure out our path moving forward. So now to get to your question, first of all, we have members last week who planted 100,000 trees in Africa on Earth Day. We have members who work with Me to We to minimize their footprint. We work with South Pole. We work on carbon offsetting. So all of these elements are being integrated into the customer experience. And the way that our members are designing the product today has dramatically changed over the past decade. You're going to have a chance to go into families' homes and dine with them, hear from local artisans, historians. So it's a completely different experience than it was, 20, 30 years ago. And I think that's how we will thrive moving forward, is looking through the lens of the customer and the experience that they need and make sure that we're delivering that.
I know, I love that, because I mean, part of the reason why we wanted you on this particular call, right, is because tours, because it's big, not big groups of people, I mean, that has a bigger power to incite change, right? So that's what, you know, your members have bigger buying power sometimes, right, to do things like that, which is great.
I was going to add, you talked about big, and really in our member survey last year, the 3 top things: local immersion, small ship, small group, and uncharted destinations.
Yeah.
So big, yes, sometimes, but it's really becoming smaller. It's becoming more intimate and personal, and that's the future.
I love that. I love that. Everyone's kind of hearing the message. Ben, if I could go to you, you know, when I saw you in New York in January, you talked about, it really stuck with me. You talked about feeling a deep responsibility for supporting your 50,000 employees around the world when things happen. And of course, we didn't foresee the extent of this then, but could you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, for sure. And undoubtedly, when we were talking about this as sort of hypothetical instances of one region or one destination being impacted and the things that we're able to do, we certainly wouldn't have predicted that this would be on a global scale. But I think when you start to talk about a sense of purpose, which is really the most important thing when it comes to engaging with our employees and having them feel like they're part of something greater and something that they can really contribute to, that transcends into times like this as well. And we do feel a huge sense of responsibility to our employees. And as you start to look at the different work that we're doing in the community as we go through the situation that we're dealing with now, we see some fantastic examples of people coming together and helping to contribute to what's going on in the world right now. And it's difficult. We have obviously hotels in most enormous urban centers. We have resorts in remote areas where we've created a community around that resort that wouldn't have developed if it wasn't for the hotel or the resort that we built there. And all the spin-off businesses that comes from that. So, you know, the restaurants and the tour operators and the boat drivers and all the people who've helped to create travel to be as amazing as it is now, that we've frankly been able to sell or to support or to book and promote. And we've got that sense of responsibility to make sure that when travel does start to return, it returns at that same very, very high level of intrigue and interest and curiosity sating behavior that frankly we help to create that. So we certainly see a sense of responsibility to our employees. This is a very, very tough time for every employee involved in the hospitality industry right now, right the way across every single segment. And we're doing everything we possibly can to support that, be it through re-education, through training, through support if we have had to have employees that are furloughed or not working with us right now, training, extending employee benefits like training resources while employees aren't with us at the moment, as well as I said, some cross-training examples as well. But I think it also has given us a great opportunity to see some of the greater community come together and to provide some really real life tangible solutions to some difficult situations that have existed. So you've probably read and heard about what happened at our hotel in New York when, in conjunction with our owner, we were able to provide housing to house New York's healthcare heroes, and these people are heroes. And we were able to provide housing for that and had 225 rooms available, which has been wonderfully successful and was a great partnership between the governor, Ty Warner, and Four Seasons. So, as we watched that unfold, we saw then the greater investment community around the world come together. So much so that we now have a similar process happening in Riyadh, in Saudi Arabia, and Mumbai in India, where we're also housing frontline employees and making that greater contribution as well. So I think we do have some great opportunity as an industry to contribute. And some of these things are really, really tangible for an employee, where we put together, using local purchasing power, food boxes for our employees in a remote resort so they can access fresh food and distribute it to our employees, whether they're working or not. Yeah. Or being able to convert a very, very valuable piece of New York real estate in conjunction with a wonderful owner to somewhere to make a real difference to people performing a heroic task.
Yeah. Well, and that's, I mean, that's the kind of stuff, of course, I mean, you get a lot of press for it, but people remember it, and it's for the right reasons. I mean, it's really incredible. I've always loved what Four Seasons has done. Thank you for that. I would love to kind of switch gears totally and go back to Catherine. And Catherine, you and I have traveled together again on assignment, and I was always so impressed with how you were a gracious host with people when you were photographing them. It wasn't like you were like, getting into their lives. You did it in such a gracious way. And you spent 30 years traveling to Vietnam, and you've been covering Agent Orange, the toxic substance that was sprayed over Vietnam that ended up affecting millions of people for about as long. So I wanted to ask you how your photography of Agent Orange changed people's lives.
Well, I do want to just say that I think that we are in a time right now, and as we start to travel again, it's going to be more important than ever, the way we show empathy and the way we show caring, and how photography does that in such a unique and just very, very special way. And my work in Vietnam has covered victims of Agent Orange. And by the way, today, April 30th, is the 45th anniversary of the end of the Vietnam War. And these legacies still remain, with millions of people still affected from the effects of Agent Orange that's passed through the DNA. So babies are born all the time. And so this is a legacy that hasn't gone away. And these people are often deformed, disfigured, and people, they feel ostracized, they feel shunned. And photography is a way to say, I'm not afraid to look away, I see you. And the way that I photograph and the way that I encourage my guests to photograph in workshops is to show their humanity, to show them as real people, not to concentrate on their deformities. And it's a way to show empathy and to share these photographs with them as we're taking them and afterwards, and to make them feel beautiful. I think we're going to be facing a world with people who feel still very frightened and broken out there, and that more than ever, I want to get back out there and just through photography, just throw my arms around people and hold them tight and tell them that they mean something, and that we can continue through this, and photography brings us together in a very special way.
And I love that. And that's why I wanted you on this call, because it's a different way of thinking about travel as a force for good, right? How photography and content really works in that way.
Yeah.
Thank you, Catherine. Will, you, in all of our conversations together, you've been very positive. And I love that. And, can you talk about why you're positive right now with your, you personally and your clients wanting to travel again? And
I mean, this conversation is just a continuation of it. Listening to what Terry said and listening to what everybody else has said, it speaks to what my agency's always done in terms of really curating an experience for somebody. And I think it's going to be even more important in the years to come for people to be conscious of all the elements on their trip. So I think I've got people that are excited to travel over this period that's going to be kind of in question. And then as it opens up, people are going to be even more excited to travel, and they're going to be more excited to use somebody that curates that experience.
Yeah. And you mentioned too, a lot of you've always kind of pushed a lot of people to low season travel. And you mentioned a walking trip in December to Sicily, which I loved.
Which I didn't know possible until recently.
Sorry, I didn't hear that.
I didn't know it was that possible until fairly recently. In other words, I keep on finding out about all these different things that are possible in the world that are off season. And I loved the things that Terry said in terms of the trends that he's seeing, because I think it speaks to everything that I believe the world is going towards.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for that. Vanessa, you started out on Wall Street So, and you've traveled extensively with your 3 kids, and you kind of turned that into a career as a travel designer. Can you talk a little bit about family travel as a force for good, since you know it so personally?
Yes, I mean, I think echoing what Will was just saying, in terms of family travel, I mean, traveling with children gives you a chance to really do it slowly. And slow travel, I think, is a trend for the future, and that's also how travel is going to become a force for good. I mean, we want slow living, we want slow food, and we need and we want slow travel. And I think when you're with children, young or teenagers, it's about immersing yourself and making sure that the moment is a collective moment as a family that will stay as a legacy, that will be talked about, family table at dinner for a long time. So in that respect, I think it's a beautiful and wonderful opportunity to travel with as a family, and it's beyond just being a form of education, in situ sort of, because of course that's the case. I think it's about really helping our children become global citizens, and going back to the early part of the conversation, keeping minds open, staying curious, compassionate. But it's also, I think, about that inner journey, for our children to really understand their place in the world and how they can give back. I mean, I think as parents, if we can succeed in making our children curious and compassionate and tolerant, we will feel that we have achieved a lot in our responsibility of parenting. And and I also observe that when families and my clients really care about traveling in a way that is slow and immersive and experiential, it's also an opportunity to pay attention to the destination and continue and give back, and then that connection that is made with the destination lasts beyond the return home. And I think that's also us, as as working in the travel industry, we're here to foster, is that it's not only the act of traveling that matters, that will be impactful, but it's everything afterwards. It's that connection, that bond that is created with the destination. I think travelers don't want to just travel for the hedonistic sort of side of things, and families even less. It's really about making an imprint and nurturing that imprint, so that that dialogue with the destination continues.
Absolutely. And I know Julia took a sabbatical when was it, November or December?
Yeah, November and December. I was just thinking, hearing Vanessa talk, I mean, the best moments, so I went to Europe with my 2 kids who are 2 and 5, and my husband and my mom. And we sailed with Amma down the Rhine. We were in Amsterdam, and then we spent a couple of weeks in Paris. And I mean, what a privilege to be able to do that. So thank you, Afar, for granting me, again, it feels like a decade ago already, but a sabbatical on my 10th year anniversary of being here. But, the city, the country was experiencing transit strikes when we were there. So we were pretty much on foot the whole time. And on one of the last days, I took my older daughter, my 5-year-old, we were staying on the left bank, and we just walked and walked and walked. And, we wandered into one of the arrondissements that I don't know very well. We just stopped in all of these local markets. I mean, it's a very sort of cliched Parisian day, but she's never had that before. And it has made an imprint on her. So we're trying to sort of do all of these, we have a story up on Afar right now about how to recreate a day in Paris, and we're building Eiffel Towers during the day. And I just think about the experience that she had in those 6 weeks. She made huge leaps just in language and her sort of understanding of the world and her place in it. And that you can't find that in a school, right? It's the school of life, and it's the school of the world, and that's pretty much the best way to nurture a child, I think.
I remember the power of a chocolate croissant too, right? Is that
there were a few?
Yes, hunting for that as well. Ben, you've traveled right around the world with, you've 3 kids too.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I love the idea of this being a privilege. I think it's such an important thing for us to keep remembering as we travel, and we travel more and more frequently. And yes, there's no question. I spend half of my life traveling and seeing different places, either for business or with my family. And the idea that this is something that is a commodity that isn't granted to us permanently has really been reinforced by this travel time that we're in now. And as I connect with people and start to sort of understand travel trends going forward, which is what we're all looking for, right? We're all looking to get back to this sort of insight and analytics driven travel planning world, so we can start to market effectively and support businesses effectively and get to that world. It's interesting just to see people's attitudes changing and people to develop the type of travel that they want to go through. You and I talked about this before, but it's very easy to sort of to latch on to some of the cliche ideas about how travel is going to change. And in reality, I think we probably don't really know quite yet exactly how people are going to react to this. Anecdotally, we can pick up on little pieces, but probably very important for us not to sort of take those very small anecdotes and create them as being the definition of travel for the next 10 years, because it would put us in a path that, aside from probably not being, from a marketing perspective, very sensible in terms of sustaining business through it, it also could create some trends that maybe aren't even the ones that will work very well. But when I look at my children traveling, and I have my eldest child back from college, living with us again. It's always fun. It's interesting to see their curiosity to get out and to see different things and to explore different places. And I think they have had a new understanding of just how good it was that we got to explore all these fantastic places. And I love the idea of sustaining the impact of a trip for a longer period of time. I think we are in a bit of an instant gratification kind of world right now. And perhaps to make some of the trips that we take have a longer lead in time to them and have a longevity that extends beyond that, not just thinking of it from a marketing world, but also from just a pure mental engagement perspective, to still continue to get those stimuli long after you've returned, and not just sort of waiting, okay, that's done, what's the next trip going to be? And I love that if some good will come of that, of this process, it'll be that we have this level of appreciation that extends for a longer period of time during the rest of our lives, and we can apply the travel stimuli to the rest of the things that we do every day that maybe aren't quite as exciting.
So true. And I always said, the second that I get jaded when I'm at a nice hotel or in a new destination, I need to get out of this job, because there have been moments, right, where you're going, and you're seeing so much, and then you're planning for the next trip, and I love that, the instant gratification part, and maybe prolonging that those trip memories a little bit longer.
Very quickly, there's another very just quick opportunity there as well. I think we frequently get to travel to places for business reasons, and it's really hard sometimes to sort of find time to go and really explore the culture of that city or the destination to a greater extent. So, certainly a lesson that I've taken out of this is to make sure I'm far more sort of disciplined about exploring somewhere beyond the 2-day meeting I need to do in Cairo when I flew there from New York. It's a different process to make sure you really understand where you're going to, because as we found out, you never know how long it might be before you can go back, or if you.
I think I'm always going to have that feeling from now on. Terry, to kind of move back to, again, kind of that old vision of tour buses dumping out, and what are the great things about a tour that that you can't get traveling alone?
Well, first of all, it has evolved so much, and now we have members who are positioning it as guided or escorted, a new way to talk about the experience. And so it's, we've touched on these throughout the conversations. It's all about local, and it's about access. And through group travel, whether it's small or large, our members have access to individuals, historians. They have access to museums where you can get in possibly an hour early or after it's closed. You can have these experiences with locals, the families. So it's really about making it personal, approachable, and it has evolved in a way that is going to continue to have appeal. And I think in this really tragic time that we're in right now, I think people will recognize the safety net that it also provides, that you've got somebody to help you if a crisis happens, if Mother Nature flexes her muscle, right, or there's a geopolitical event. you've got someone there to assist you. I remember when I first started, my first weekend joining USTOA, and it was Arab Spring Rising. And I got into the office and what do I do? It's the first day on the job. This just happened over the weekend. So I said, you know what, let me call a conference call of all of our members and whoever wants to join. And I wanted to listen to how I could help and what they were doing. And I was amazed. We had members who chartered planes on their own expense, getting their customers home. We had members working with members, getting their customers outside of the core part of Cairo. So that safety net that comes with being part of a group experience is so valuable, and it'll become more valuable as we get through this pandemic. So anyway, it's not the way it used to be. It's going to have to evolve. We all are going to have to evolve and figure it out. I almost feel like we shouldn't talk about recovery. It's really about reimagining and redefining what this experience is going to be. Because if you say recovery, it's saying that we will accept what was the past. Yeah. And the past isn't going to happen. So we need to reimagine, redefine, and you know what? I have all the confidence in the world. It'll be 10 times better, but it'll be different.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, especially because I'm still grieving the past, right? So it's, it's kind of looking forward. It could be better. It can be better. And I love the way you said that. And Will, I wanted to go back to you because what Terry said, the trust level of a group or the power of access. And you do that as well with your clients. I mean, you talked to me about how the feeling that they're really part of the healing process and going to local restaurants and guides and stuff. Can you talk about that a little bit more?
Definitely. I mean, our company started out with group travel, and then my brother and I just kind of figured out over time that we liked working with individuals and FITs more, but it's the whole experience that Terry and everybody else is talking about. It's giving people local access that they are not going to necessarily have, and it's access that's not necessarily replicated on a daily basis.
Yeah.
It's things that only happen at certain times of the year, like a lantern festival or a special market that's not happening every day.
Yeah.
For tourists, for the tourist buses and for the cruise ships. So I love curating those kinds of experiences. I love people that are looking for those kinds of experiences because the world is full of them. And to stay on the positivity, like with this kind of a crowd and with the crowd that is in this industry across the world, it's exciting for what this is going to look like. And we have no idea right now, but I'm super excited about the next couple of years.
I love that. Vanessa, you started something. The way that I found you was you also write this amazing blog, and the way that you found these just unknown, undiscovered places, it just really caught my eye. And then I realized that you were a travel designer. So you started something called the Generous Traveler to help travelers give back even more and make it easier on them. And you also donate a portion of proceeds from each trip to charity. And I thought that was amazing for a small business and small company. Can you talk more about that?
Yes, I mean, it's sort of two separate elements that run in parallel. I mean, on one hand, I do find it important to just give back also at my own level of being a small business owner and donate a portion of the revenues that I make from the trips that I design for my clients to charities. And I decide to do so by giving back to charities at the destination where my clients have traveled. It's my way to give back, and it can be a conversation together with my client or not if they're not interested. But I think it's also it opens conversation. And I think the Generous Traveler that you were mentioning, it's a platform in the making, but it's really a marketplace that I wanted to that I'm putting together. The idea occurred to me when we traveled as a family in Sri Lanka a few years ago with my children, and realized that it's a small country with huge needs and incredible beauties, but it was impossible to really know which organizations, which grassroots organizations, which local charities doing good and that we could participate with, whether it be by donating some of our time, donating money, but engaging with. And there's really just lots of scattered information on the web, but no platform that really aggregates these organizations. And then thinking of it further, I really appreciated that for travel philanthropy to take place, I think travelers need to connect with the cause. Of course, we can all give to incredible organizations like Charity Water, Médecins Sans Frontières, and we know that where this is going to go. But I think for travelers to connect with the causes and the needs in the destinations where they go, they also have to connect with organizations that act specifically in what they care about, whether it's conservation, whether it's addressing poverty, whether it's ocean preservation. So I created the Generous Traveler in that respect, where by country that are visited, I have themes. There's 8 of them, some those that are mentioned, and I highlight in a curated way, as a curated platform, sort of under the radar organization or social enterprise that really deserve the attention of the travelers. And it's a platform in the making. There's, listeners in this panel today who wants to help it grow to the next level. It's a platform that really deserves investment and attention. And I think there's a lot of beautiful feedback around it, and it can be a very powerful tool. And I think ultimately with my clients, what it becomes, it's also a tool to open the conversation about just travel as a force for good in general. It's not about telling anyone what they need to do. That's a very personal decision, how one wants to do good and give back. But I think it's a great eye opener.
Yeah, we also, when I talked to you before, you mentioned, someone might plan a trip to a beautiful beach resort in the Maldives, but they don't really understand until they get there that it's not just about the beautiful beach resort, right? I mean, it's about so much more than that. And how do you give back at that point? Or a lot of people that go to Africa, right, want to do something when they get back. Thank you for that.
And I think, and maybe if I can just add, I think our responsibility as actors in the industry, in the travel industry, is really to create first-class travel experiences, but at the same time benefit really and address the needs of local of people at the destination. So it's really that balance, and I think we're in the incredible position of being an enabler for that, and having the resources to communicate about the needs and
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I need to stay at a good hotel. And I also want to help people. So Catherine, I just wanted you to, we talked earlier about this story, and when I had asked you, how have you seen travel photography make a difference in people's lives? And you told the story about one domestically. And I would love if you just could talk about that, how it changed this man's life.
Yeah, it was a remarkable experience that caught me by surprise. A few years ago, I was on assignment for National Geographic Traveler, and I just traveled to Santa Fe, not far away at all. And I ended up with a Native American gentleman, and he was a little bit reticent to have his photograph taken. In fact, I went there to photograph his little herd of buffalo, but I found him to be more interesting than the buffalo. He was very shy. And we just kind of made friends, and then he allowed me to take a portrait of him. And it ended up being the full page opener to the story. So I was excited, and I sent him some copies of the magazine. And then some months later, I found myself in Santa Fe, and I got in touch with him, and I went over to see him. And he said, the day that the magazine arrived on my doorstep, I was in a very bad shape. I was very depressed. My girlfriend had left me with her kids, the kids we shared, and I was just at the end of my rope. And I was thinking of, that really life was not worth living anymore, and maybe I should just throw in the towel. Then the magazine arrived, I opened it, and I saw this photograph of myself full page, and he said, it's when he realized that he mattered.
Yeah.
His life mattered, he mattered. And I just think that is the power of photography. And as I said before, it's not that I'm trying to save the world. I care about the actual individuals whom I photograph.
Yeah. Just
one by one.
I love that. And I feel like I think in the end, my siblings and I always say, like, everyone just wants to live a good life. Like, everyone just wants to feel like they matter. And I feel like that's where all of our conversations should come from. So I really love that story for the power of an image, what it could do to someone's life who was in that image. And you often send photos to people after, which I love too.
Always.
Terry, I wanted to just ask you, we're 10 more minutes. Okay. I wanted to ask you how you're planning this sustainability conference
Yes.
in Europe, and I wanted to kind of just talk a little bit about that and what that looks like.
Well, it was supposed to look like May 20th and 21st, but that's not happening. But the reason it came about was that I feel like sustainability can be overwhelming, and it can feel complex. And while a lot of our larger members have really sophisticated programs, and some of them are B Corp members, but a lot of our smaller and medium-sized members don't know how to start. I don't know how to start. It is complex. So I felt the necessity to convene my members and start figuring it out, and to say to them, every journey is going to be different for every business. There's no one template for everyone that's going to work. You have to figure it out. So if we can educate you on all the different components, and Annie, you highlighted 3, then I'm doing my job as an association exec. So we're very excited about it. We've got a lot of learning to do, but we've got case studies and professionals that are going to join us and make it manageable, and have each member figure out their path forward.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, you hit on it, right? Overwhelming is like, it's so overwhelming. Where do you start as a business owner? You know, whether you employ 5 people or 500, and I mean, I think bringing people together in that way will really help. I look forward to hearing about it in September, right? Is that?
Yes, September 1st. September
1st. Okay, so I did, all right, let's talk just briefly, if anyone wants to talk about, there's been a lot of questions about fear and, you know, fear of traveling, and does the power of travel as a force for good and travel in general, does it overcome fear in your mind? Will, does it overcome fear for your clients?
It depends on where the fear comes from. I mean, I certainly think that travel makes you aware of the fact that we're all basically the same.
Yeah.
The people living over the hill aren't any different than us. So,
yeah,
in that sense. But if we're talking about the fear that you get through the major media, I don't know how to address that.
Yeah.
I think there's an opportunity here, Annie. Just when you think about trust, you know, we've all got this element of somebody entrusting us with their health and their safety and their security, and maybe that's changed a little bit. And certainly the parameters of what makes you move to booking a trip might be a little bit different, and there may be some other obstacles that we need to overcome. But ultimately, I still think we're a curious-natured group of people who will explore. We just might need to change some of the parameters around so people develop that trust earlier. And that may come with, you know, the way brands perform. It may come with the way communication takes place. But ultimately, it's going to come over time, and people seeing that, you know, perhaps some slight modifications, some travel plans will give them the level of trust that things will be okay.
Yeah, I love that.
And
Vanessa, yeah.
I was going to add, yes, I think that this crisis has taught us the value of community throughout the world. I think, you know, in any environment today, there's a sense that, you know, in London or in the UK, it's about cheering for the NHS. I mean, all over the world, this crisis has made people come together around the idea that community is hugely important. And I think that if we promote travel on the basis that it's an incredible vehicle for positive feelings like empathy and compassion, then we really stand a chance for making it during this crisis, not but after, you know, when we all resume our travel, about positive impact. And I think it will resonate still in the mind of people. So we'll help them overcome fears, I think, by, you know, rallying around those positive values.
I love that. And I mean, I was having, to be honest, like a terrible week, and this has really made me feel better. So we should all get together again like this. Okay, I'm going to do a quick round robin of all the panelists. Where do you want to go tomorrow if you could travel tomorrow? Terry.
Malta, because my board meeting was supposed to be there last week and it didn't happen, so I want to go back to Malta.
Okay, nice. Catherine.
Well, of course, I want to go be with my boyfriend in France after I get to the hairdresser. But yeah, I actually would just like to jump in the car and drive down the California coast, go through Big Sur and go to Los Angeles and be with my brother and see my fellow Californians along the way.
Oh, Julia, fellow Californian.
Yeah, I mean, God, I was up and down the state so much, and in the lead up to, I was anticipating that we were going to be sheltering in place, and man, I went to pretty much every county, I think. We canceled a trip to Japan, and I was really looking forward to taking my daughters there because my daughter's preschool friend moved back with her family. So I'm hoping that we can revisit that trip as soon as possible.
For sure, for sure. Ben, where do you want to go besides Inglewood?
I mean, I think that there's the obvious example of places that I would love to be able to connect back with family in the UK. I have a very elderly grandmother, and you always sort of worry during times like this that you're going to get that opportunity to really spend time and connect with family. And on the other side of things, I think from a business perspective, certainly to start some more direct conversations with some of our key partners. Obviously, if I could get to New York right now, that would be a great place for me to meet with most of our really sort of biggest partners and really gather those insights as we strategize, I think, together as an industry to how to bring this thing forward and how to look forward and how to be optimistic for sure, but how to do that with strategy. So certainly some family travel would be really great. And then start to sort of put the business and the industry back together would be really good as well.
Yeah. Hope so. Will, where do you want to go?
Whichever city most of my friends are, I'd like to be there to celebrate.
Come to London.
London, sure.
Vanessa.
I think I'd like to go somewhere where just I really feel very much alive. I mean, in a very sort of personal way, I think I just want to go somewhere where there's music, food, smiles and place. When I closed my eyes, I knew you were going to ask a question like this. I thought of Brazil. I always feel alive when I'm in Brazil. It's just they have this joie de vivre, this very contagious positivity. So maybe there.
I love that. And Ellen, where do you want to go? And I'll let you close us out.
So actually, a friend of mine in the industry said recently, which actually was so real for me, is that we're going to be like dogs coming out of our home with the car door open, and you just get in the car and you have no idea where it's going, but you're just so excited to get in that car. And I think for me, that's an airplane. Wherever that plane can take me, that's where I'm going to go. But first, I'll go see my ailing mom because I miss her and I miss my family. So that's my first stop. And I will say, Annie, that these have been so incredibly enlightening each week that we do these. And I thank you so much for just moderating and putting these great groups together with me and with Afar. And to Julia for sharing, this is really what we believe in at Afar, is the power of travel and the good of travel. And we've been doing it for over a decade and inspiring and guiding our travelers to be more empathetic and thoughtful as they travel the world in a very privileged way. And, this has been an incredible panel. We've been doing these for weeks. I don't think I've teared up yet. So I've had several moments of tearing up. So I thank you for that. And it is very heartfelt and soulful. And this is how we're going to move forward together. And I really appreciate the community that we have built together and appreciate you all today. I will say that going back to the survey that Annie was referring to earlier, we didn't know the type of response we would get. And we did it through one of our very engaged newsletters and got, in 24 hours, almost 2,000 people responded with their answers to our survey, which I'll share just some of the results. But it's really inspiring to know that 2/3 are planning a trip right now. And that's a big number, and that, the pent-up demand for travel is really there, and that more expect to travel internationally in 21 than they did in 19. So right now they're prioritizing driving destinations short-term, which is my dog in the car visual, but they're still thinking about big trips and planning forward. And our readers are very interested in flexibility, travel insurance, and direct bookings, which is very much what we hear from a lot of you. But it's very, when the conditions change, because they're following the news very closely, it really matches with what we see. Our readers are really engaged. So just to give you the percentages, it's 85% plan to travel internationally at least once in 21, up from 74% who traveled in 19. and 80% plan to fly in the next 12 months, which tells us that they're not as scared to get on an aircraft. So these are inspiring statistics, and together we will move forward in a very thoughtful and conscious way. So I thank you all again, and I wish you all the best, and I give you a big virtual hug because I miss human connection.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're all invited to my house for dinner in London when we can fly again. So
We're going.
yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you again. Thank you everyone for joining and for these wonderful
Thank you all.
Thank you so much.